And welcome to New York State of My Mind here on Calm Radio. And it's a new show, new time. Still me and Pat. It's definitely going to take a little getting used to for sure. As we've over the summer been recording a podcast, which I hope you guys have all been able to listen to on YouTube. It's been a lot of fun. But me and Pat have certainly slipped up and said our old show name a few times, but I think we should be on top of it now. I got to think.
I think we got it good now. I think we're good to go. Finally.
So let's get right into it, Pat, because this has been quite a busy time in the sports world. The NFL season is in full tilt. College football is slowly starting to come back more and more and more. And obviously the NBA finals are starting to get going, which is really exciting. A lot of stuff to get to. So let's just start with it. I think we should start with, this Monday night game that's coming up between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. A really exciting matchup between two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So far, Pat, what do you think would be, a big key to this game? Just in general, just looking at this as a face value.
It's really simple to me. I think whichever team can get a couple stops is going to win. I expect this to be a pretty high-scoring game. Obviously, listen, I'm not going to pick a favorite. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this game because we're just blessed with the fact that we're going to be able to watch Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson go at it, hopefully, for the next 10 years in the AFC. Whichever defense is going to be able to get some stops, I think the Ravens obviously are more stacked in that department per se, but man, don't overlook the Chiefs defense because towards the end of the last year, they really got things going, and I think they were really the key in Chiefs winning the Super Bowl last year. Wouldn't you say?
Definitely. I mean, they stepped it up for sure. I don't think they're that bad of a unit,
Yeah.
to be completely honest. I think they kind of get that kind of reputation for no good reason. They used to be bad under Andy Reid, but they've since been a pretty stout
Yeah.
unit. But I think that ultimately, Baltimore's offense was such at least in my opinion, was a little bit of a question mark coming into the season. Not as far as the talent they have or anything like that, but just, hey, did anyone, figure out how to stop this offense? It was a very different scheme, which I think really got to a lot of D coordinators last year. But so far in the early, going into this season, it seems like that this Baltimore offense is legit. The scheme's just a good, well scheme, and ultimately just being executed at such a high level by good players that it hasn't seemed to matter whether there's been, now a whole year of film on it or not. Defense is still struggling to stop Lamar in that rushing attack. So that's what it's going to come down to me. I mean, if Kansas City can stop the run, which is kind of what we saw Tennessee do in that playoff game, they got a chance for sure, obviously, considering they have Pat Mahomes and company, that on that offense.
Yeah, and I'll also add if the Ravens can stop Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the ground, that'll be a big help for them because we saw him in week 1 rush for how many yards? I think over 120. I think he had.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, he was awesome. So if the Ravens could, it's going to really come down to the trenches, I think.
Definitely. I mean, and they're also both good offensive lines. They do a good job for their quarterback. But it'll be interesting, and ultimately, it's two really great head coaches as well. Two coaches I personally really like with Harbaugh and Andy Reid. I think that these are guys that have just been, obviously been successful for a really long time, and I just think that this is definitely the type of Monday night game you love to see, which is just two really quality teams. Even though it's just week 3, and you never really know how these teams are all going to finish out the season, but I think we can all, say pretty confidently that, these are probably the two best teams in the AFC. All in all, do you think that this is likely to be potentially a little preview for an AFC championship game, or, is that maybe looking too far ahead?
I mean, you said it right there. They're right. They're probably the two best teams, maybe if not in the AFC and the NFL. But I don't want to jump too far ahead. It's week 3. I know they're both super talented. They both probably are. They both have two of the best quarterbacks in the league, two of the best coaches in the league. But man, let's shift gears to Buffalo because they might have something to say about that. We saw them take out the Rams on Sunday. Even though the Rams gave them a little scare in the second half, they came back. I do want to ask you about this. I kind of want to play devil's advocate with you a little. Do you think that was a pass interference call at the end of that game?
So if I was that official, No shot I'm throwing that
Yeah,
flag.
no, I don't think
No
so.
shot. I personally, and just me, like how I think, like if it's down towards the end of a game, I'm all about letting the players decide who wins. And I hate when officials step in and make a call like that, especially if it's not like super egregious. Then
Yeah,
I personally just disagree with calling anything really down the stretch. Now, am I going to say that there wasn't contact? I mean, yeah, there was contact. And, you know, someone made the argument I saw, well, if that was a no call, we've seen LA fans, very upset on social media that that should not have been, called. Would Bills fans be the opposite, be upset there wasn't a call? Probably, but would I've called that? No. Do I think it was like a completely bogus call, like as a call itself? Eh, like it's a little ticky tack. I think it's just more the time of the game and how that game was going. The fact that there was that huge comeback
yeah,
that was, ultimately, I mean, it was made. I mean, ultimately, the Rams had the lead.
yeah.
I think amplified it. But to be honest, I mean, obviously, I watched that entire game. The refs that game were just in general really pretty trash. There was a lot of really terrible calls, and to be honest, I mean, obviously, I think that that pass interference call was way bigger of a deal. But what got that LA Rams comeback started was and I say this in air quotes, a Josh Allen interception where he threw a jump ball to his tight end who clearly came down with it. And a safety came over, tried to wrestle him with it. And ultimately, a tie goes to the receiver, but they called a pick on the play and it totally changed the game. So, both teams kind of got a bad call that really changed the game completely. Obviously, the Rams was more in the spotlight, but yeah, the refs in general are just bad. And, that call, I mean, that PI call, I'm not calling it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Bills. I would not, absolutely not have called that PI call. I thought both the receiver and the cornerback were both fighting with each other. Let me ask this, because we've seen Buffalo obviously 3-0. They've looked great. Josh Allen has looked amazing for the most part. His stats are pretty ridiculous. I think I saw something on Twitter. He set some sort of record, but what was I? Oh, okay. So does it concern you at all that although the Bills have looked great, obviously we knew their defense was going to be stout, and Josh Allen's playing really well. The addition of Stephon Diggs has helped them a lot. Does it concern you at all, however, that they've had a tendency to sort of, I don't want to say lax in the second half, but these past 3 weeks they've gotten out to big leads and sort of have let the other team get back in the game? Does that concern you, and do you think that McDermott and the staff will be able to correct that going forward?
So it's funny you actually bring that up. That has been a conversation amongst Bills fans
Yeah,
since McDermott's been hired. For some reason, this team has struggled tremendously in the third quarter under McDermott. It's very weird. Like, they will always play a good first 2 quarters, first half of football, solid, prepared, obviously, especially like we've seen these last 3 weeks. They come out of the gates hot. And then that third quarter, whatever, I don't know what happens in the locker room at halftime of that team, but they come out and they just don't look right. They look like, they're just not playing with that same urgency that they started the game with. And then come the fourth quarter, they seem to kind of wake up and get back into it. But the third quarters, the last 2 games, they've been terrible in the third quarter and have allowed two teams to come back and make it a game. I mean, ultimately, Miami, they outplayed them the whole game, but just fell apart in the third quarter, let them back in the game. Obviously, the Rams, and that was more of the entire half. They just weren't right until that last drive of the game. So, is it concerning? Of course, because how many more times can they get away with playing such a bad third quarter, especially if they got some good teams they got to play against pretty soon. Um, but at the same time, this is what this team kind of does. So obviously, I'd like it to be better, but like they're 3-0. They won 10 games last year, and it's been the same thing. And ultimately, Allen has proved now, I think, in 3 years being the Bills quarterback, that he plays great, in the fourth quarter, and he'll always put them in a
100%.
position to win. And as long as the game's close at the very least, going into the fourth, like the Bills have a good shot at winning the game. So, it's a little bit of both. It's concerning, but yet I'm kind of used to it,
Yeah.
but it's definitely not good.
I do want to shift gears to your AFC East division foe, the New England Patriots, because this is one of the most interesting teams in the
Absolutely.
NFL this year. And I got to be completely honest with you. I was wrong. I did not think it was going to work this well, especially this early, especially 3 weeks in. Cam has looked great. He really has. I don't think the Patriots have a vertical downfield threat. I think that's what they're missing in their offense. But they've been running the ball. That Cam has been making. He hasn't really made too many mistakes, I would say. He's been great. Cam's been great. So I want to get your thoughts on the Patriots. Do you think they have a chance at winning the division?
Yeah, 100%. And I know during our preseason podcast, we said we both agreed the Patriots were, somewhere between about a 7 to 8 or 9 win team, somewhere in that range, mediocre, and they're not. Cam Newton, I'm not going to say has set the world on fire, right? But he's been really, really good. He looks like the Carolina Cam Newton we saw several years ago. I won't go as far as say he looks like MVP Cam, but he looks like the Cam Newton that we saw back when Carolina was starting to get things cooking and people were starting to kind of recognize him as like a good player. It feels like that's the skill level he's at right now. I mean, he threw for over 300 yards against the Seahawks.
Yeah,
I know that
397.
and I know that defense is not the same it used to be back in the Legion of Boom days, but listen,
For him to go toe-to-toe with Russell Wilson, who I think is MVP right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that with that defense that's been playing still very well, despite the losses they've had in the front seven, offense, obviously they run the ball well. Edelman's been great. And N'Keal Harry is starting to come along a little bit, which is promising for them because, he was a first-round pick that really looks like a bust after last season. Do they scare me like the old Patriots with Brady and Gronk like back in the day? No. And it's not the same Patriots team. Ultimately, I think Patriots 3 years ago would have won that game in Seattle, to be honest.
Yeah.
But this team can play. They can contend for the division. I think they're absolutely, at the very least, a wild card team.
Oh,
Hands down.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say it we were wrong. We were wrong,
absolutely.
man.
We were wrong. I admit it.
I'm sorry, Bill Belichick. I'm sorry I doubted you. We were wrong. Yeah, like you said, Cam's been playing great. For him to go – the moment I knew is when I watched that Sunday night game and I saw him play and go head-to-head, I was like, oh, my God. Like, the Patriots might win this game. Like, I was not expecting them to actually have a chance at the end. Cam played great. Like you said, threw for almost 400 yards. They beat down the Raiders yesterday, who I think were a little bit of a fraud of going 2-0 the first 2 weeks. I don't expect them to really keep that up for the rest of the season. But, yeah, man, we were wrong. I got to say
definitely were wrong. And Cam, he even made some throws in that game that made me go like, wow, like that was a dime. Like, I don't, like those old, like I said, those like old Cam throws that like, you're like, I think there's maybe 5 or 6 other quarterbacks in the league who could throw that football, like that. So he's still playing at a pretty high level, which is, certainly good to see. I also want to get your take, Pat, on.
Oh, boy. I know.
Well, we're not going to get there yet. Hold on. I'm going to
right.
spare you a little bit.
All right.
I'm going to spare you a little bit. Don't worry. But I do actually want to talk to you about a game because I think it's 2 teams that have been so fascinating, which is the Bears and the Falcons.
Okay.
Just because, obviously, Trubisky gets benched. Nick Foles comes in, plays great. I think we can agree Trubisky era over in Chicago, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he'll ever get a starting job ever again in the NFL. I wouldn't expect him to. I don't think he really deserves it, to be honest with you. I do want to talk about the Atlanta Falcons, though, because
by the way, already eating my pick on. I chose them as you remember. I chose them as a team to miss the playoffs. I was going to make it, and I thought I was so smart. At the beginning of every game, I'm like, look at them, like they're balling out.
Hey, listen, if each game was shortened by about 30 minutes, then I think you would be right. Listen, man, like it's the same story with them. I just don't understand it. They go into halftime looking great, and then they come out looking like crap. Like it makes no sense to me. Dan Quinn, I'm surprised he didn't get fired yet, but it's coming. It's coming this season. I honestly do like him. They obviously had that great Super Bowl run a couple years ago where their offense looks great. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Kyle Shanahan left that organization, and since then, they have not looked as explosive. They haven't looked the same. I know Matt Ryan throws for a lot of yards and has some good statistics, but if you just watch the game, man, like it just boggles my mind. The defense can't get a stop. The offense looks all sorts out of it in the second half. It's just this team just comes out of the locker room in the second half and just looks lost. Like it's crazy to me. And what was that? They choked the lead to the Cowboys. I don't remember exactly how many points they were winning by. at halftime. I think they were up like 20, right? They were
Yeah,
winning,
something like that.
they
Yeah.
were winning like by at least 2 or 3 possessions in that game. They lost that game. They obviously lost the lead to a Nick Foles-led team after Matt Nagy made the switch. And I didn't even think that Foles played that well in the game. I just thought that Atlanta let them hang around for too long and then came back to bite them in the end. But, yeah, man, I listen, they lost week 1 to Seattle. You can't really kill them for that. I think Seattle's going to be at the top of the NFC by the end of the year. But that's just 2 more blown leads. We saw in the Super Bowl. We saw last year. It looks like the end of the Dan Quinn era in Atlanta. Definitely does.
Definitely. And then now I have to bring up, fortunately, both New York teams, because I think that they're both just kind of in this weird position, right? I think with the Jets, we'll start there just once again to spare you here, Pat.
Okay.
Clearly Adam Gase, right, he's out of here in a matter of time. They
Listen,
I understand. Listen, I understand that they are injured. They're playing with a lot of nobodies. But at the same time, like we've seen like coaches get a lot out of a little. We saw it last year with Brian Flores. We've seen it in the past. Those players just look like they're playing with just no inspiration, no motivation. They just look like they're just going through the motions. And to me, that is a telltale sign that this coach is not getting through to them.
Yeah. For me, the Jets, like you said it, man, Adam Gase. It's really all has to be said. I do want to say, though, listen, I know you don't really love the Jets. I know you don't like – no, I'm not even going to soften it. I know you don't like the Jets. But you have to feel a little bad for Sam Darnold.
He's the only one I feel bad for, frankly.
Yeah, no, you have to feel a little bad, man. He loses his running back. He has Adam Gase as his head coach. Just a bunch of the best players on his team opt out. The guy's just in a dysfunctional organization, the bad offensive line, just running for his life. And he makes some good plays throughout the game. You see it on social media. He makes some really talented throws. And you're like, wow, like this guy could actually be a good quarterback. But I think what happens is what happens often with a lot of players, not just in the NFL, but in sports. You could be super talented. You could be a good player. But if you get drafted to the wrong organization or the wrong situation, your career might be ruined. And I feel like that's what's happening with Sam Darnold. I think if he potentially leaves the Jets in a few years, I think other teams would be willing to give a shot at him just because of his talent. But right now, it's not looking good, man. I got to say, I feel bad for him. I really do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that 2018 quarterback class has been the epitome of exactly that.
Yeah.
Allen and Lamar Jackson gets drafted to
Let me ask you,
very solid, well-run organizations. Look at them now and look at the other 3.
Let me ask you a question. You think if Lamar Jackson got drafted to the Jets, you think he'd be as good as he is today?
Not a shot.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Not a shot. And here's even this. I was even thinking about this over the weekend. Like, I know there's been some talks about the Jets. If they really get the first overall pick, should they draft Trevor Lawrence? Just start over. And if I'm Sam Darnold, frankly, I hope that happens because if I were him, I'd want to get the hell out of New York.
Yeah, no,
I would not.
Really
I would want to start over somewhere completely different because that organization, even if they do get a new coach who's good, you still know that means 2 years, maybe even 3 of a lot of losing. And why would you want to even be a part of that after the last 3 years? So I think if he should get out of there if he can after this season.
I guess we're gonna do it, right?
I mean, I feel like we have to, unfortunately.
Let me
take it away, Pat. Take it away.
Let me just start off by saying that not only did the Giants lose to the 49ers yesterday, 39-6, 36-9, my bad. They lost while the 49ers were missing. I have my phone right here. I'll read it to you. They were missing their QB1, RB1, RB2, tight end 1, tight end 2, wide receiver 1. 1 through 3, their corners. They're 2 of their best defensive ends. Obviously, Nick Bosa out for the year. Their 4th defensive end, their 5th defensive end, their 2nd linebacker, their 4th and 5th receiver, and their number 1 center. Listen, you're laughing. It's pathetic. It really is. Listen, I'm not expecting. Like I told you on the last time we did a podcast on this, I am not expecting the Giants to go out there and win 8 games this year. I'm expecting them to be competitive. When a team, I know San Francisco is great. I have love for Kyle Shanahan. When a team trots out essentially their second unit, for you to go out there and lose let alone just not even look competitive at all. That's just inexcusable. And I really got to say, I really am on the Daniel Jones train, but he just is turning the ball over way too much. I can't blame him. I can't give him all the blame because the offensive line, outside of Andrew Thomas, which has been the one bright spot for the Giants, he's actually looked good. Rest of the offensive line, it's looked like garbage per usual, but you just can't keep turning the ball over. I'm sorry, and I'll just also say it. Evan Ingram is terrible. He's a bust. They should have never drafted him in the first round. The guy's very athletic, but he can't catch and he can't block. So I don't know where you put him at wide receiver or tight end because he can't do either. It's just mind-boggling, man. Obviously, I'm not going to get on Joe Judge because it's early. These are not his players that he brought in. Obviously, I think there's going to be some trades that you see throughout the season. But man, oh man, my roommate and I yesterday were talking about whether or not, like you said, you talk about the Jets potentially getting the number 1 pick. If the Giants don't beat Washington this year, we were reading their schedule last night. They might go 0-16. Their schedule is brutal. The Giants. They're the two games on their schedule that are very winnable from here on out because the past 2 weeks were winnable games. Chicago, which they came down to the 1-yard line, they could have won that game. Didn't, obviously. There was a pass interference call on Golden Tate. And then yesterday, which they got blown out by the second stringers. If they don't beat Washington one of the 2 times, I would not be surprised if this team didn't win a game because you just got to look at their schedule. It's brutal. It's brutal. They haven't played Philly twice. I know Philly hasn't looked great, but they're more talented than the Giants, and the Giants struggle to beat Philly every year. They haven't played Dallas twice yet. They're yet to play Seattle. They're yet to play all these teams. They're yet to play Arizona, who looks really good so far. Man, oh man, it's getting ugly. I'm really hoping it doesn't come to that. The one question I have is, if they do get the number 1 pick, do they draft Trevor Lawrence, or do they trade out of it and acquire assets to build around him? Because going into this year, I was a big Daniel Jones believer. You know that. He had a 86 quarterback rating last year. He had good numbers. He would have set the touchdown record for quarterbacks last year if he didn't miss those 4 games. But man, I expected him to take some strides. I know there wasn't a preseason for him to get acclimated with the new coaching staff, but hasn't looked great. And you gotta wonder, man, if Trevor Lawrence, a generational talent, is sitting up there, you gotta consider it. Not saying I do it, but you gotta consider it.
Joe Judge could consider it just because Daniel Jones isn't his guy.
Yeah.
Now, granted, Gettleman's still there, which obviously I think.
Don't worry, he won't be there.
But that's exactly
he won't be there. That's
kind of what I was saying.
Do not worry.
Is that I don't think Gettleman makes it after the season, just because I think that, on paper, this Giants team, we talked about it, looked way more competitive than last year, and so far the on-field production hasn't been there, and I think that some of those holes that the Giants had last year, although initially looked like they would be maybe not filled, but they wouldn't be as big of holes, in reality have still been the same holes.
Yeah.
The offensive line still been a problem. The receivers still have not been very good. The defense is still not very strong. There's a lot of issues across that roster that I don't think maybe we recognized over this offseason. Yeah. So we'll see. But if anything, we know that, Joe Judge, if he wants to build it his way, right? I mean, we've seen it in the past. I mean, look at the Dolphins. Look at the Bills, right? Their coaches came in and just stripped the team of what was used to be the nucleus and started from ground zero. And it's possible that, Joe Judge might be doing that after the season. So we'll see. I
do want to add before we move on that Dave Gettleman traded a 3rd, 4th, 5th, another 5th, 6th, and a 7th while the Giants were rebuilding for Alec Ogletree, DeAndre Baker, which we know what happened with that.
Oh, yeah.
Pending free agent Leonard Williams and Isaac Yiadom from Denver. And to add to that, he gave $53 million in guaranteed money to Nate Solder, Patrick Omahe, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, I'm sorry, Jonathan Stewart, and Kareem Martin. Not a good look. Just going to say that. Not a good look. We should move on.
Definitely. And why not stick to football, but hopefully something that brings up more happy feelings for you, Pat. We're going to talk about college football, which is starting to get kind of interesting now as we sort of head into the thick of things. Obviously, the big news now that the Big Ten, the Pac-12, they're both going to be returning soon, both in time for the college football playoff, which is going to be awesome to have all the power conferences eligible, although I don't personally think there will be a Pac-12 team. But in the meantime, though,
You're not alone.
yeah, I don't know. But at least the SEC returned, and we already had some big time games, and I think some things that really changed the landscape of that conference, and frankly the Big 12 as well from last weekend. Obviously, Kansas State upsetting Oklahoma as Spencer Rattler just did not look good in that one at all. Mississippi State took down LSU right out of the gate. Michael Leach, how about that? Gotta love it. Gotta love it. And obviously Texas almost going down to Texas Tech, which, of course, listen, I feel like we say this every year, Pat. It's Texas and it's USC that always get hyped up every season and just never live up to the hype.
I know I'm supposed to be unbiased, but was it bad that I was rooting for Texas Tech to win that game? I don't know, man. I do want to start with Oklahoma. We got to start talking about Lincoln Riley, man, because he gets a lot of praise, but you got to say, like, you can't lose that game. You can't. I know Rattler didn't play great, but at some point we have to talk about how this guy is able to get all these great offensive recruits, but somehow the defense just looks bad every single year. I know it's the Big 12, but man, oh man, you're playing Kansas State and you can't get a stop in the fourth quarter to save your life, right? Am I right?
Yeah, and to be honest, to build off of that, so I might be wrong on this, but if I remember correctly, so Kenneth Murray, right, their starting linebacker last year, drafted the first round by the Chargers, was the first Oklahoma player to be defensive player to be drafted the first round since Gerald McCoy in like 2010. I mean, they just don't ever have a good defense. And I feel like it's gotten worse somehow since Lincoln Riley took over. The offense has gotten better. Obviously, I mean, he's had, two, number one overall picks and Heisman winners in a row, followed by Jalen Hurts, who some thought should have been a first-round pick. So he's been doing it great on the offensive end. But, man, especially in the Big 12, you can just have an average defense.
Yeah.
Which is huge, but their defense has been consistently ranked. It's been ranked in the 70s and the 80s in college football, which if this is a program that wants to compete for a national championship, they'll never win one with that defense.
Yeah, absolutely not. No chance. Moving on to Texas. Are they back? Do you think they're back? Because I certainly don't.
I honestly just never know with that program. And I thought that last year was going to be like the year for them because they showed so much promise. I think Tom Herman is a really good coach. Mm-hmm. I think that Sam Ehlinger, although I don't think he's like an NFL quarterback, obviously, but he kind of gives me I don't want to quite say Tebow vibes because no one's going to really be.
He gives me some Trace vibes.
Yeah, definitely. Just a gritty, like, kind of hardworking kind of winner, a lot of emotion, a leader. And that Texas team does have some really good ball players on it. But, yeah, they just, haven't seemed to really be able to put it together other than that 1 year we saw 2 years ago from them where they, I think, won like 11 games.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, honestly, with the whole Big 12, I mean, if there's, say, 2 Big 10 teams, one's undefeated, one's a one-loss team, would you take that one-loss Big 10 team over a Big 12 team?
Well, assuming that one loss is to Ohio State, yeah, I would.
If it's like a Penn State or if it's like a Wisconsin or even a Minnesota, frankly, like, because to me, like, the Big 12 this season just does not look good on paper, to be honest, and I just think that, maybe it's time to kind of close the door in the Big 12 because every time they've been in the playoffs, which has just been Oklahoma, it's kind of the same story every year.
They'll put up points.
The 3 seed to the 4 seed, right? They'll put up points, but they won't stop anyone, and then they'll just lose. It's just every year.
To put it like Stephen A. Smith put it one time, it's actually pretty funny. He said, in the playoff, all you have to do to beat Oklahoma is just make them punt twice. Just make them punt twice, and you win the game. Quite frankly, he's not wrong. Like, this team just can't play defense. I do want to move on to the defending national champions, the LSU Tigers. Obviously, I think I may be wrong on this, but I think they're returning only 2 of their 22 starters from last year. Derek Stingley Jr. did not play. in last week, but maybe that's part of the reason that KJ Costello looked like Joe Montana and threw for 623 yards. Another reason is probably because of Mike Leach, and we see that all of his quarterbacks tend to put up absurd numbers in college. But listen, I don't know about you. It would not surprise me at all. And I said this a couple days ago. I think LSU is going to finish the season unranked. I just think that they have so many, not holes, but just so many areas to address. Just, they had a phenomenal team last year. And I think when we look back on it, after all of these guys have their all of these guys' NFL careers are set and done, like Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Derek Stingley Jr., we're going to look back and be like, yeah, no wonder they were that good in college, because they're all studs in the NFL too. But in terms of this year, man, I don't know, man. I think LSU is going to take a back seat and finish unranked this year.
I could see it. I mean, and I don't think that, that's something to like, oh, like they had such a terrible season. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter how good they were last year.
Yeah.
You lose, 20 of 22 starters. You're just simply not going to be as good. It's just too many inexperienced guys all playing together. And especially with how this offseason was for college football, it doesn't surprise me that they just didn't look quite right. And not to mention, I mean, the Big Ten, when you think of it, I mean, I know LSU kind of was an air raid offense last year, but when you think of the SEC, what do you usually think of offensively? Running the football, good defense. That's what a lot of teams do. And obviously there's a Big Ten, some SEC teams that can really throw it, but nothing like Mike Leach's air raid. That's on a whole nother kind of level. And I think that was also just kind of a horrible matchup for them week one to have to go against such a foreign offense for the SEC. I just think that might have just kind of been like, oh, like, wow, like this is really something different, something we've never seen before. So.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that they also lost Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator from last year, or their passing game coordinator from last year, who was obviously great in helping Joe Burrow win the Heisman. Listen, it's going to be a long year for them, but they have good recruits. I think they'll be on track next year. But like you said, too many inexperienced players on the field at one time to make up for that.
All right, we're going to take a really quick commercial break, but we come back. We're going to talk about this NBA Finals. We know who's playing. Who do we think is going to win? It's New York State of Mind here on Com Radio. I'm just going to play one ad and then put us back in. We haven't taken one commercial.
No, I know. I was thinking that too.
That's like we probably should.
Lions Pride, locally owned and operated in downtown State College since 1976, offers everything Penn State for every Penn Stater. At Lions Pride, we are Penn State.
Welcome back from the commercial break. Let's send you to the studio with Nick, Roder, and Pet Castero. This is New York State of Mind on Com Radio. And back from the commercial break. Real quick here as we wrap up our show, we definitely got to talk about these NBA Finals. Pat, your Lakers are playing the Heat.
I can't believe it, man. I really can't. I know they have LeBron James on their team, but man, oh man, it's been a long 10 years. It's been a long 10 years. From the Kendall Marshalls to the Robert Sacres to the Jordan Clarksons of the world. It's been a while. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and how about this Heat team? I think has been a team that going into the playoffs, everyone agreed could make some noise for sure. But I don't think anyone ever envisioned this. I mean,
except for J.R. Smith.
Yeah, got to give him credit.
J.R. Smith did predict this.
I mean, but I was convinced that this was going to be the year the Celtics put it together and go to the finals. But clearly, I was wrong on that one. And I think you just got to really give your hat off to Pat Riley. For people who are saying, even the years when the big three was no more, right? Easily could have packed it up, had the team tank. They never had a top 10 pick ever during this time, and yet they have built one of the best young teams in the NBA. It has been so impressive to watch.
Yeah, Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra,
yep.
That culture over there, man, it fits Jimmy Butler so well, and I would be shocked if he doesn't end his career there because they allow him to be him, and I think that's why they've been so successful. Obviously, they're a very deep team, thing about the Heat is that Jimmy Butler could score 12 points and they could still win. They have so many shooters on their team. Goran Dragic, obviously Tyler Hero had that great, I think it was game 5, right? Game 5, he went off for 37 points. Duncan Robinson, who 3 years ago thought he was going to be joining sports media, and now he's starting in the NBA Finals. That's a tremendous story right there. They're just loaded. They have a deep bench. Andre Iguodala, who's a Finals MVP, doesn't even get that much playing time. Like they just have a very deep team. They're gritty. They play defense. They shoot the three-pointer really well. And that's why I'm honestly, frankly, a little scared for my Lakers, because although the Lakers are a great defensive team, I think they're a little top-heavy compared to the Heat. The Heat have a way better bench than them, and I think that could be the difference in this series, to be honest with you.
Hey, all I'm going to say is it comes down to one man, and one man only comes down to LeBron James, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's the guy. He's the guy. They went out in the prized, possession that they have on that team, and he can do it with anybody. Real quick, Pat, who's winning the series? How many games?
Come on, man. I'm going Lakers in 6. Lakers in 6.
I'm taking Lakers and 5. This has been the very first episode of New York State of Mind that's been live in the studio. We'll get this back up and going once again every night, Monday night, 6:15. So with that being said, for Pat Tartaro, I'm Mitch Broder, and have a wonderful evening.